11th at 4 p.m. Today we are meeting to consider the opt-out of HB 581. We have an agenda before us. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
A motion by Mr. Grimes, a second by Mr. McCall. In favor? Unanimous. If you're able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And please join me for a moment of silent reflection. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today as we consider the opt-out of HB 581. We'll begin the hearing with a presentation from staff led by Mr. Larry Hamill and our superintendent, Mr. Mitch Young.
Larry, if you go ahead and bring up the first slide. I probably should say good afternoon, everybody, before I jump right into this. All right, so we're here to talk about the proposal that we as a staff have made to our Board of Education over the opportunity to opt out of House Bill 581. And just as a very brief background in our community, obviously, as a member of this community myself for the last 17 years, we have seen a rapid rise in the value of our homes in Forsyth. A lot of that having to do with the fact that we live in a very attractive community. We've got a very successful school system. We know that supply and demand drives prices up, and we've got a lot of demand of folks that want to live here. In 22 and 23, and that's what really drove us to the point that we're at tonight. In 22 and 23, we had historically high reassessment values of our homes that drove up our property taxes. And the other thing that I think is really important to point out is our community is really unique in the standpoint that we've got a real imbalance between residential and commercial. When you look at us compared to some of our competition out there, whether it's Fulton County, North Fulton County, Gwinnett County, Cobb County, they've got a lot of commercial. In our community, because we've got such a limitation on commercial, our residential folks really carry the burden of of our property taxes. Larry? Just want to hit a few points here on our current financial status, and there's been a lot of, dare I say, fake news that goes on out there or misleading news. And so let me hit this one right out of the gate. Forsyth County Schools has and will continue to provide a senior school property tax exemption for homestead owners age 65 plus. This exemption has absolutely nothing to do with any of the 65 plus senior exemptions that exist out there. Currently, our maintenance and operation millage rate is 15.208, and we have a debt millage rate of 1.418. Over those years that we had the spikes in reassessment values, including last year, which didn't have a high spike, but was still up, I think, about 7.5% over the previous year. And in the last 3 years, we have lowered our millage rates by 3 full mills plus some change. And we have the lowest millage rate that we've had in Forsyth County since 2009. We continue to be recognized statewide and nationally as a good steward of taxpayer resources. We maintain a 5-star financial efficiency rating with the state of Georgia, one of only 6 school systems in the country to have a AAA bond rating, and that happens because of responsible financial management. In the 2024 election, Forsyth County voters passed a referendum on House Bill 717, which is a homestead exemption that caps reassessment values at 4% annually. That House bill is now, once it was passed in November, is the law for Forsyth County Schools. And so I want to talk a little bit about House Bill 717 before we go into House Bill 581.
Before you move on,
sure.
Just 2 main points from that slide. One, if you're 65 and older, you're eligible for a full abatement on your school taxes, and no matter what's decided, that's not changing. I know today there was a lot of posts made in senior citizen groups.
Yeah.
If you're 65 and older and you're exempt from school taxes, you will still be exempt from school taxes, regardless of the outcome of this decision. And 2, effective January 1st of this year, because the voters of the county passed this measure by 74%, there is already a 4% cap on your taxes. That's new and never existed before. So the decision before us is the decision between two homestead exemptions, which are very, very similar and both provide very, very similar tax savings benefits to the constituents. So just want to be clear about that because there's a lot of information flying around online that's not exactly correct.
I think also to piggyback off of that, the school board doesn't have the power to get rid of the homestead exemption for 65 and older. That actually has to go back to the citizens on a referendum to be voted on by the public. So just know that when people go out there and say that we're getting rid of the 65 and older, we don't even have the power to do that. So just have that information out there and know that there's a lot of misinformation, but we don't have the power to do that if we wanted to.
No, it's great
We
points. Yeah, great points. Okay, so House Bill 717 was passed by unanimous resolution by our Board of Education and a unanimous agreement by the members of Forsyth County State Legislative Delegation a couple of years ago. And again, this was, we recognized those two spiked years where we had historic high reassessment values and understood that in addition to lowering millage rates, we wanted to give some sort of property tax relief to prevent those crazy spikes from ever happening again in terms of what we're able to collect. And so a floating homestead exemption designed to limit reassessed property values increases at no more than 4% annually was the number that we arrived at. This was after the folks I just mentioned, the Board of Ed, the staff here, and our legislative delegation looked through all of our historical budgets, looked through our projections, and determined that a 4% cap would keep us tight in our budgets going forward, but would allow us to operate as we need to operate as a school system. Now, this cap is set to expire in 2035. Not the other homestead exemptions. There's no expiration date, as Mr. McCall pointed out, with the 65 and over. It's just this new 4% cap that expires in 2035. And what that allows us to do, because we've never had an exemption like this, that allows us a 10-year period to see how does it impact us. Can it be adjusted? Can it be extended? And by the way, along the way, if even with that cap, we are getting more than what we need in terms of being able to operate budgetarily, then we can roll millage rates back and continue to lower those. So that can continue to happen as well.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point. Today, there was posts made all over the place that said that one bill versus the other would allow the school board to raise taxes faster. Taxation is determined by the millage rate, and this either one of these bills doesn't affect the school board's ability to raise or lower the millage rate. So that's just trying to provoke anxiety in people.
Yeah.
The last 3 years, the Board of Education has lowered the millage rate more than anybody in this state. So we want to do the right thing, and we've been trying to do the right thing over the last few years.
Well, and lowering the millage rate and increasing the millage rate should be a local control decision. We work hard through this budget to make sure it's balanced. I, as a board member, want the ability to lower millage rate, and it should be decided at a local level, not the state level.
Yep. And that's a great segue in the next bullet point. House Bill 717 in the local floating homestead exemption that we're talking about, this 4% cap, was developed based on Forsyth County Schools' local economic realities. And that's really important, just to kind of put a mark next to that when we get into House Bill 581. Ours was passed at the local level. It then went on, was passed at the General Assembly, 2024. It was approved by our Forsyth County voters in this previous election by almost 74%, and it took effect and is in effect right now and is guiding our financial planning as we get ready to go into next year's budget season. Mr. Hamel? What I do think, and this, I'm not sure, this may be just conjecture on my part, but I believe that our bill, when it hit the General Assembly, raised eyebrows of legislatures throughout the General Assembly, and the idea caught on of having a homestead exemption to cap reassessment values. Just my thoughts, but what we do know is after ours, there was suddenly talk throughout the state, and that's what led to House Bill 581, which was a statewide cap on reassessment values. And again, I'll go into that in just a minute. The concerns I have with a state-issued cap versus a locally developed cap is it doesn't take into account local realities and local expectations that our taxpayers and, quite frankly, the parents of our school children have. I won't go through any of these, but unlike Forsyth County Schools, Not every system in the state of Georgia provides what we provide, which includes that senior property tax exemption for homeowners age 65 and over. That most places don't have their own cap already in place. We've got, this is one that raises eyebrows when I say this, but we have school resource officers in every one of our schools here. That is not something that's paid for by the state of Georgia. That is a local expectation, local decision made that's funded locally. And I think in the day and age we're living in, most people will look at that as a no-brainer. We've got to have that. Again, I won't read through the list of everything, but these things that you see up there are just sort of a smattering of things that our families and parents of school-age children have come to expect. Okay, so that's 717, our local self-imposed cap on property tax reassessments. Then you have House Bill 581. It too is a floating homestead exemption designed to limit homestead property tax bill increases if home values rise faster than inflation. And they used, instead of a fixed cap, where ours was set at 4%, they determined to use an inflationary measure that you would call, probably, we're assuming is going to be a consumer price index. It's yet to be determined by the Georgia Department of Revenue's commissioner. And I'll talk about some concerns we have, but what that means is, in short, that's going to vary from year to year. House Bill 581 not only applies to school districts, but to counties, consolidated governments, municipalities. To be clear, if we opt out of 581, that is just for school taxes. The county commissioners have this before them. They can still opt out of 581 regardless of whether we do or not. And that will apply to the taxes that they collect for their operations when it comes to the county government. House Bill 581 has no expiration date. It's a permanent fixture. School systems have a one-time opt-out opportunity in law that was provided us that must be completed between January 1 and March 1 of this year. Passed by the Georgia General Assembly in 2024. In the November election, it was approved by a statewide referendum and locally received about 69, almost 70% of the vote, a little bit less than our local one. If both of these are in effect, whichever one helps the home taxpayer, the homeowner more, is the one that is applied. All right, so I want to make sure I say that so that nobody thinks I'm trying to sit back on that. That is true. But I'm going to explain why I still don't think that's best for our school system in just a second. So House Bill 581 took effect in January 1, and we are now in the opt-out process to potentially make a decision to opt out of that.
Point that you mentioned, which I think merits repeating. Perhaps unintentionally, the General Assembly is requiring us now to make a choice on these bills, and they still haven't told us what the rate is based on. We still don't even know whether we opt in or opt out. What are we opting in or opting out to?
Yeah, that's a great point.
We have a general idea, but
And that segues right into the first concern that we as a staff have presented to the board. 581 is tied to a consumer price index, which is, that could be a national index, that could be a state index, that could be an Atlanta Metro index. We just don't know. And we're not certain about that. What we do know is ours is tied to our local realities. House Bill 581 creates uncertainty for the budgeting process from year to year. You know, it's really important for us in a growing county like ours to have some ability to predict, with some reasonable level of prediction, what we're going to have coming in at us from year to year when it comes time to hiring teachers and building schools and so forth. 581 has no expiration date, which is sold right now as a positive. From the school standpoint, I look at that as something that's really scary, because if this has major league negative effects, there's no adjustment to it. That's in place, and it's not going to go away. And 581, as I said, has an opt-out opportunity. Mr. Hamill? So just to kind of show you historically, and these are just estimated, but historically, you've got three columns there that show what CPI would be. And I'm sorry, you know what? I think this is the older one. We've got another one with a third column in there. We had one for an Atlanta Metro, but I'll just go with the national one on this. Is that? Yeah.
Let me check real quick.
Now, this is fine. So House Bill 581, the comment says House Bill 581, CPI for previous year, This is really built on on the national CPI. We've got another one that we'll post out there that shows you just for the Atlanta area. It's very similar. There's not much difference at all. But as you look from 2018 to 2024, you can see how it fluctuates, how it goes from 2.1 to 2.4, down to 1.8, down to 1.2, then it hops up to 4.7, then on up to 8, and then back down to 4. For us, in trying to manage and steward our taxpayers' dollars and provide the services for our school system, you can look at the next column where it says House Bill 717 and what it would look like if we had a cap on that. And in the previous years, that's where that cap, that cap would sit at. Now, the actuals, if you go to 2 columns before that, that shows you the actual. So if our 4% cap had been in place, you can see that it would have saved the taxpayers' dollars every single year on this chart for the last 8 years. In 2018, instead of 9.86, it would have been capped at 4, instead of 8.6, and so on and so forth. Larry?
Let me see if it's in here.
Oh, that's okay. You can stay up with that slide.
Okay.
Yep, next slide, there we go. Okay, so just as a point of comparison, and on our website, we've got a nice side-by-side chart that shows you the two. And as Chairman Valdez says, there's not a huge difference between them, but the little differences are there, are very impactful on the school system. House Bill 581 was the Georgia General Assembly's approach to solving a local challenge with a one-size-fits-all, state-ordered solution. All right? Ours was a local challenge with a local solution developed collaboratively with our local delegation of representatives and our local school board. 581 is tied to inflation, which is unclear, it's volatile, it makes it much more challenging and to do an annual budget projection. 717 with the fixed cap allows us a lot more predictability. 581 was designed specifically to blunt the rise of property tax reassessment values, and that's the sole purpose. And I just want to hit this. This is probably the biggest difference, if you can understand the lens of what we're looking through, is 581 was absolutely designed to give property tax owner relief when it comes to reassessment values. We not only agreed with that, we were the ones that led the charge on this, okay? But ours was designed to do 2 things. One was to blunt the rise of property taxes, but to do it in a responsible manner that also allows us to provide educational service and safety needs for the students of Forsyth County. House Bill 581 is aimed at municipalities and counties and school systems, and there's really no thought giving to school system needs. I will tell you, I'm biased. I work for the school system, but we've got the best school system in the state of Georgia, and it requires some resources to keep that going. And so this was done very responsibly to make sure we give property tax relief, but in a way that we can continue to provide these services. And that's all I have to say about that, Larry. All right, and I won't read through this slide, but I do want to drive home. What we did responsibly ahead of everybody else was come up with a local solution, okay? Local government, all right? Finding a local solution to a local challenge. And what 581 has done is take a statewide challenge to a problem that looks very different community to community. Larry? These guys get tired of me hearing me say this all the time, but one of the things that makes Forsyth County Schools, in my mind, so special is that we really do model what it means to work with your community, to work with your state representatives, your business leaders. We have this formula that we think is what made our school system so effective, and that's the model of collaboration, innovation, and accountability. And we collaborated in order to come up with a very innovative approach to this challenge, and one that holds us accountable. And I think the 717 is the solution that allows us to provide relief as well as continue to provide great services to our community in terms of education. So right now, I won't read through these, but this is just the opt-out requirements set in place by law, of which we are at hearing number 3 out of the 3 required hearings. And there's the timeline. With that, I turn it back over to you, Chairman Valdez.
Can I make one point real quick to one of the first slides? What I want to point out, historic inflation, I think one of the reasons that the state went with 581 was these 21 and 24 rate, even though those particular rates are unique to Forsyth, those same rates were across the state of Georgia in similar fashion, almost for every county for the state of Georgia.
Yeah.
So it's just not us that had a high. The entire state was seeing rates like changes like that.
Yep. Yep. Oop, thank you, Larry. Larry is our CFO, by the way.
Thank you,
Okay,
Mr.
back to you, Chairman Valdez.
Thank you, Mr. Young and Mr. Hamel. So I'm going to open up the floor in a second for the public hearing portion of the evening or the afternoon. Just something I've said in the last couple hearings that I think merits repeating. The decision today is the decision between two homestead exemptions. So at the end of this process, there will be a homestead exemption on your school taxes, something that has never existed in Forsyth County. If you're a senior citizen, 65 and older, eligible for a homestead exemption, total abatement of your school taxes, under no circumstances is that changing, okay? We've run many simulations, and the tax savings difference between the two measures is measured in the hundreds, not in the thousands or in the tens of thousands, okay, like some folks have said online. The tax saving difference between the two bills averages about 1% of 40% of your home's value. So the taxation on that amount. So as you can see, it's reduced to a pretty small number. Both measures are going to provide robust protection so that we don't see these big swings anymore in our taxes. And in reality, over the last 10 years, the 4% fixed cap would have been more beneficial overall to the taxpayer. So it's all about how things are framed, and the decision today is the decision between, or not today, next week, is the decision between two robust tax-saving measures, both of which accomplish the same things. And the difference between them is measured in the hundreds of dollars over a 10 or 20-year period, not in the tens of thousands of dollars or even thousands of dollars. So I want everybody to take that with you, because there's a lot of things that are said online, and this is a complicated subject, but the decision is between two great bills, and this is a good problem to have, I think, in our community, that we're picking between two good tax-saving measures. So with that, nobody signed up tonight to speak, but if you're here and you would like to say something, I'm glad to allow you to come up and take some time to, or if you have any questions or short
Mr.
story.
Chairman, before we do that, either the superintendent or CFO, from what I know we've seen a lot, this is not just a Forsyth County opt-out issue, this is statewide. And I get that, to me, I think 581 served the heart behind it was probably good. But I think from my understanding, a lot of school districts have seen the same issues that we have kind of seen in this bill. So we are not the only ones, going through this opt-out process. And the last I heard was over 100 school districts across Georgia doing this. And I just didn't know if that's still, that are going through the opt-out process.
Mr. Grimes, I had a CFO meeting last week, which is mostly North Metro RESA, and I know everybody in North Metro RESA is opting out, of my understanding. I do know there's some counties in South Rural Georgia that get a lot of equalization money through KBE, and they don't get a lot of the, they get more money from the state than they do their local property tax, and some of those counties are opting in to do it. Some of those counties get as much as 72% of their revenue through the KBE formula because of the way it's set up. There is a county in North Georgia.
Pickens.
I'm sorry?
Pickens.
Burke, I think it is. And
Pickens
they
opted
get,
in.
and they get only 5 or 10% of their budget from KBE. So they're definitely opting out of this. The few that are opting in, though, seem to be the counties that get a huge percent of the money from the KBE formula, though. And if nobody knows what that is, that's the quality basic education formula on how the state funds you.
How about you share our contribution to that program?
We right now only get about 45% from the state of Georgia to fund the school system.
So when it comes to, when you share with them equalization, that really is generated from counties like ours that give the first 5 mills worth of our tax collections back to the state, correct? So last year, I think to Mr. McCall's point, how much last year, our millage rate is 15.308, but the first 5 mills of that goes to the state for other counties, and how much did that amount to last year?
The state of Georgia took almost $99 million out of the state funds that we were going to get to go back to the state as our 5 mil contribution.
So that's important.
Yeah, just as important, because for the taxpayers to know is that the first $99 million that we collect as a school system from the taxpayers goes to the state of Georgia, and we don't see any of
It
that.
never comes back. And I'm personally, that's a lot of money. Yeah, so basically, we donate you guys donate $100 million that gets sent to Atlanta and gets distributed to other school systems and never comes back here because we're a rich county, so we don't see any benefit from that money. So the first $100 million that's collected here locally goes to the state, never comes back. It is
Technically, we don't actually send it to the state. It
Right.
stays with us.
They deduct it
just
from
is
our-
deducted from the state money we could get.
right. They deduct it from what we're getting.
Right.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
That's totally within the power of the General Assembly to change that. They've not opted to do so. The idea of fixing any kind of taxation rate to CPI, I mean, the General Assembly could also do that for our income tax. I don't know about you guys, but I pay a lot more in income tax than I do property taxes. So if we're trying to save taxes, I mean, that's another way that we can do it. Yeah. So I'll open up the floor again. If anybody that's here would like to ask a question or say something or whatever, we'll open up the floor. No? Okay. Well, seeing as how there's no participants, we will go ahead and close the public hearing. We will hang out here if you guys want to talk, but we'll go ahead and end the official public hearing portion. So I'll seek a motion to adjourn. A motion by Mrs. Hoyes, a second by Mr. Grimes. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, guys. The hearing is adjourned, but we'll stay here if you guys want to talk or whatever. We'll be here.